everybody. It's Connie Stewart with SimplySimpleStamping.com. I'm so glad you guys could join me today. It's time for another Tuesday tip video. And today's tip, we're going to get into a little holiday gift giving. Yes, I want to share with you a really great and simple project, how you can create a custom box for your hand-stamped cards. You know, there is nothing better than giving the gift of your artwork to others. And now we're going to have a pretty little box for it to go into. Are you ready to learn how? Great. Let's head over to the stamping table and I'll show you how.
Hands down, I think giving the gift of hand-stamped cards has always been one of my more popular gifts. People love it whenever they see me come to a party with the gift of hand-stamped cards, but we also want to give it in a fantastic packaging, right? That we also DIY'd. Now, I want to share with you a couple things about my project today. So inside this box, I was able to fit 10 cards and 10 envelopes. Now, these are just cards I've created here on my channel. You probably recognize many of them. And mine have a lot of embellishments, so you might be able to fit a few more, but I was able to get 10 pretty easy. Another thing I want to tell you before we get started on the project is this focal image right here on the front of the box. Did you know that this is basically the front of a card? Friends, use your favorite card design that you've made, and that's what can go on the front of that box. So get creative there. In fact, let me also tell you, you could just add a card to the front of the box. Now you've got a card for the recipient, and of course, you've got a fantastic decorated box with the card. Hey, we're gonna double dip there. Why not? Okay, today we are gonna focus on how to create the gorgeous box. I don't want you to worry about writing down any measurements because I've got a download that goes along with today's video. So you'll have the measurements for the box. You're going to have the supply list. You can come back and watch the video if you need to, and you can order any of the supplies you need right here. But the thing that's awesome about today's free download is, yes, it has a free diagram as well. So you're really going to love having this to make creating this project super easy. Let's talk about the supplies that we need. You're going to want to start with 2 coordinating colors. Now, the larger one is going to be for the box and the smaller one's going to be for the lid. So decide which way you want those to go. For my box, I'm going to use Misty Moonlight. This is 8.5 inches by 10 inches. And then for my lid, I've got some Moody Mauve, 7 inches by 10 inches. So now we're going to get into creating the box, and I have got a little tool that I created a long time ago. And I know many of you have already created a box maker shim in the past, but we're going to go over it really quick, how to create this wonderful little tool. Now, what have I got here? These are some of the acetate sheets that come in our photopolymer stamp sets. Maybe you're like me, you've been holding on to them going, I'm going to come up with something. Well, today that something has arrived. I want you to take one of the acetate sheets. Mine is a 6 3/4. Now they come in all kinds of different sizes. So find the largest one that you have, and you want to cut this down to 2 inches by 6 3/4. That 6 3/4, if you're off by a little bit, don't worry, it's going to work fine. We just want 2 inches by the longest length that we can get. All right, I have that cut down. The last thing you're going to need is a piece of 1 inch by, in this case, 6 3/4, forgive me, 6 3/4. So this is 1 by 6 3/4, and I have scored right down the middle at 1/2 inch. What we're going to be creating with these is what I like to call my box maker shim. Now, this is something that's going to attach to your Simply Scored board. Friends, if you do not have this board, don't turn off the video just yet, because I will teach you how to create this box even if you don't have this. If you don't have this, you can skip this part of the video. You can scroll forward until we get to the box making part. But if you have a Simply Scored board, guys, you are going to love this tool. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with that little acetate sheet, and I've got the 2 inches up here at the top. I'm going to take my stylus tool. I want to use the thin, whoops, there we go, the thin end of my stylus tool. And here's what we want to do. We want to score this at 3/4 inch and just really dig that tool into the into that acetate. Now I'm going to come over to 1.5 inches and we will score again. I have all this information here in the download, so don't worry if you don't catch that. I'm going to move my Simply Scored out of the way. And I've taken that piece of cardstock there and went ahead and folded that in half. You're going to want your bone folder for this. Now, you noticed I used Daffodil Delight. Let me tell you, it is probably a smart idea if you use a very bright colored piece of cardstock, because you don't want this to get lost on your desk, okay? So I chose something very bright that I would be able to see. Now, hopefully you can see I have a 1/2 inch section here. I have a 3/4 and a 3/4. So it's going to be pretty obvious where this piece of cardstock is going to go. It's going to go here on this 1/2 inch section. Okay, so you notice I have a piece of tear and tape here on one side, and I'm going to go ahead and do it here to the other side. You want a really good strong adhesive here, guys. But we're going to go right up to the edge of that cardstock. And let me tell you, once you've made this once, like I said, I still have my original one that I made probably back in 2012 or something. I mean, I have had this thing forever. All right, I'm going to take my bone folder. I'm going to burnish the tear and tape. I only want to tear or remove one part of this tear and tape. I don't want to remove the other side just yet. So now that tear and tape is exposed. And what I'm going to do is going to kind of fold that. I'm going to place my adhesive sheet. See how it's just kind of sitting right inside that little fold? That's what we want to do. And then we're going to bring this over and close it. Okay, that's easy enough. Go ahead and give that a really good press. Now I'm going to remove the other side, and now I can simply fold that over. All right, that is what we need to do to create the shim. In fact, if you want at this point, you can even write box maker shim right here, so you don't look at it later and go, what is it that I made? All right, we are now going to fold our shim over. We have those crease lines in there, remember? And you're going to want to really, really give that a good crease with your bone folder. See how it's like really bent right there? Okay, we're going to get this other side and we're going to do that same thing. Give it a good crease with your bone folder. Okay, so you can see it's really kind of almost creating like a little triangle shape. All right, now let's talk about what this little tool does. When you have your Simply Scored board, you will take the cardstock side and you're going to attach it to your Simply Scored board. It just kind of clips right there. That's why that acetate is so awesome. And remember, we're just upcycling that. So we're going to have this sitting on the side, but I want you to notice the Simply Scored board slopes. So it's not going to fit all the way down. It's not going to touch the Simply Scored board down here. That's okay. It's this that we're most concerned about. We want that to be level. Okay. Now I'm going to show you how this magic thing works. One of the struggles you have when you try to create a box is that box and lid have to fit inside each other. We don't want to have to mush them, but if those pieces of cardstock are exactly the same, guess what? They're not going to go together and live in perfect harmony. So that's what this little tool does. And the Box Maker Shim is going to be used when you're creating the lid. So our lid piece was in our Moody Mauve. This is the one that was 7 by 10. And what I want you to do is just kind of gently lay that up against your Box Maker Shim, okay? The one thing you want to make sure is you're not getting underneath it, and you really shouldn't, but just kind of make sure that that's where you need it to be. And now we are going to score this, and let me go ahead and bring in my diagram so that you can see. We're going to score this at 1 1/4 inches on all 4 sides. So we'll go 1 1/4, rotate it around. Again, just make sure you're not going underneath that shim. And we'll get all 4 sides. Guys, if you've never seen this shim in action, I am about to make you go Cocoa for Cocoa Puffs. Okay, that is the lid. Box Maker Shim, we are done. Don't throw this away. You will use it for the rest of your life. But now I'm going to show you how to make the box. So we're going to bring our diagram back in. And this one says for the box scoring, we're going to score it 2 inches on all 4 sides. Again, no shim on this one. Now, if you're not quite figuring out what does that shim do, that creates this teeny tiny little, just a little bump out in our cardstock so that, again, box and lid can go together nicely. So we have these pieces done. Stick around if you want to learn how to create it if you don't have a Simply Scored board. I'll go over that at the end of the video. Bringing that diagram back in, can you see we're going to do some cutting here on the 4 corners? I'll tell you what, they're both the same. When you do this, you're going to do it to both the box and the lid. But you can see in each corner I have a square. And what I want you to do is cut, just barely cut off that score line, okay? Just barely. So can you see we have a little square right here? When you are cutting, this little square is the only thing you should be cutting on. And I'm just going to miter, and that's when we just cut from the inside of that square to that outside corner. And can you see we just took off these little triangles, just like that. So cutting from the inside to the outside. And you can see we're going to do that on all 4 for our lid and our box. So I will go ahead and get all of these cut for you, and then I'm going to show you how to put this box together. All right, so I have all those prepped and ready to go. Before we go any further, this is a good opportunity for me to tell you, should you want to stamp all over this cardstock? Remember, this is the edge, this edge of our box. So maybe you want to do a nice border stamp all the way around. This would be the time to do it. So before we put the box together, should you want to do any stamping on the box or the lid, this is your time. But for this one, we are going to actually let our beautiful card be our cover. But we're going to take our bone folder. A bone folder is just a necessity when it comes to making boxes because we want really good, sharp creases. We don't want them rounded, you know, where all we did was just, you know, gently fold over. No, make sure you're getting those little tabs as well. And so I've got all 4 of those done. To adhere this together, I'm actually going to use multi-purpose glue, but you could use your Stampin' Seal Plus. You want something pretty strong. Gravity's going to want to kind of work against us here. So I want you to see how I'm putting the multi-purpose glue right up against that score line because I want the box and the edges to go together well. You don't need a lot of multi-purpose glue. It is pretty strong stuff. But you notice I'm just kind of going all around there. By the way, you're also going to see I do all of my glue at one time. It's a very forgiving glue. So I'm going to come right back here to where I started, and I'm going to fold that down and bring the corner right next to it. And there we go. I'm going to just keep going all the way around my box. See that forgiving glue? Yeah, I like it whenever my fingers slip. And that can happen. We are going to get all 4 sides. Remember, this is our lid. I'm going to come in, put that down on my table. Lid is done. I'm going to do that exact same thing, friends, with my box. Box and lid. Now I'm going to show you the magic of that shim because you will see, oh, I have to give it just a little tiny smidge there, but do you see how nice my box and lid fit? If I had not done this, let me tell you, it would have looked like this. We would have had to smush the edges. And we want this box to be able to open easily. That shim is key. All right, you have just learned how to make your own gift box for your cards that you're going to give this holiday season. Now, I'm going to go ahead and move on, and I'm going to show you some decorating.
A quick reminder, I have that free download for you, and it has the diagram as well. Remember, you can find that at simplysimplestamping.com, or just look down in that YouTube description. There's a direct link to today's post. I'd love for you to have that and be ready whenever you want to create your own DIY Christmas gift box.
I've got 2 boxes to share with you today, and both of them I'm going to use the Christmas Classic stamp set. I just thought it was really fun sentiments, and we're going to have a little fun with this with some heat embossing. So I'm going to bring in the cardstock and designer series paper I want to use for the front of my box. I'm going to be using some pretty peacock because I wanted to bring out some of the pretty peacock in this designer series paper. And that is from Winter Meadow. It is beautiful. So I have a pretty peacock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so 1/4 of a sheet. My designer series paper is 4 by 5 1/4. I've got another little piece of pretty peacock. This is 1 inch by 5, or I'm sorry, by 5. I'm going to try that again. 1 inch by 4 1/4. And then I have a little scrap here of Moody Mauve, and this is 3/8 of an inch by about 4 1/4. It's really just a piece of scrap. All right, here we go. First things first, we're going to do some heat embossing. And I'm going to need my Versamark pad, and I'm going to be bringing in my embossing toolkit. My toolkit just makes embossing so much easier. This is the Embossing Buddy, and I'm going to run that across my cardstock. It's going to leave a little white powder behind, but that's fine. That is going to prep the surface to make sure if I've got any lotion or any oils from my hands have not gotten on this cardstock, because this embossing powder is going to stick to anything that might be sticky. So I'm going to take my Versamark pad, and we're going to stamp the word Christmas in Versamark right here in the center of my pretty peacock. I'm going to use my reverse tweezers, and I think I'll just pour a little bit more of my white embossing powder here on Christmas. And now I can tap off any excess. Now there's also a brush in here, so if you find what we like to call embossing boogers, you can brush those away, but mine's looking pretty good. So it is time to heat set. And to do that, we're going to use our heat tool. Now, I do recommend you heat this up for about 20-30 seconds to kind of make sure it's good and up to temperature. And I'm going to hold it by my reverse tweezers, and I'm going to keep the heat moving back and forth. Okay. I'm going to reverse it, heat on the back side, heat on the front side. The reason I do all this is that heat sometimes can warp your cardstock. And so by moving the heat around, doing it on the back and on the front, kind of helps ensure that my cardstock, oh, there goes the magic. Do you see it? Do you see it all melting? That's what we're going for. We want to melt all that embossing powder. And you know it's done when it goes from kind of dull to glossy. I'm going to set that aside. I want to make sure that embossing powder has a chance to cool. So I'm going to take the designer series paper, and I'm going to add that to the front of my box. Now remember I told you at the beginning of the video that I could have made this an actual card as well. But I am just going to create a focal image. Adhesive here on the back, I'm going to bring in my box, and this is going to adhere right onto the lid. Let's do a little stamping on that 3/8 of an inch piece of Moody Mauve. I'm going to take a pretty peacock ink pad, and just for making things go a little quicker, I put Merry and Wishes on one block, and I'm just going to stamp that right there at the bottom. But you know what? That Merry did not come out right where I want it. So you know what? That's why I gave you a little extra. Let's try that again. You know, it's such a small scrap, I'm really not worried about it. So what we're going to do at this point is we're just going to snip and say Merry. And then let's snip here at the word Wishes. I'm going to add mini Stampin' Dimensionals to the back of this. And now I'm going to take the word Christmas. Now, remember I told you about that powder that was on there? Now that that's cooled, I can just take a little soft cloth and just buff that right off so that it looks really nice. You are going to decide where you want this to go on your box. Merry Christmas, Wishes. And I'm going to go ahead and add a bow to this box as well. I loved this white iridescent ribbon. It is so beautiful. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press that bow onto a mini glue dot, my favorite method for adding bows. And I'm just going to add a pretty little bow. Inside that box, you're going to fill it with your favorite cards. Your gift wrap is done. Oh my gosh, we love that, right? Very simple to do. Really quickly, I want to share with you how I created a different box. That's this one here. I went a little more traditional. I did still use the Christmas Classic stamp set. So if you'll stick with me, I'm going to just show you how I kind of created my own designer series paper here. All right, this one's going to be kind of fun. I'm going to start with the soft sea foam and my holly leaf. And I'm just going to randomly stamp. I know you're going, really? That's such a light color. You know, it's going to be great as a fill-in, because remember, I'm kind of creating my own designer series paper, so I want things to be really nice and full. Okay, so there is my soft sea foam. Now I'll come in with shaded spruce, and again, same stamp. I'm not even going to pay attention to where I stamped the soft sea foam, okay? It's just kind of there to sort of fill in. You notice I like to rotate my cardstock around. That gives me that real random feel to my homemade designer series paper. How about some real red holly berries, because we can't have holly without berries. And these are just going to kind of go right here at the base of my holly leaves. Now at this point, I want to add just a few more. I want a little bit more of that real red to kind of pop here on my cardstock. So feel free to just fill in just a little bit. We've got one more color we're going to bring in here, and that is some pecan pie. And this is what I like to call filling in the bald spots. You know, you're occasionally just going to have these little spots that you just feel like you need something. What am I going to put there? Well, this little accent stamp is just perfect. Now that we're stamped, I'm going to bring my shaded spruce ink pad back in, and I'm going to take a small blending brush because I want this to just have a lot more color. I'm just going to tap that on my ink pad, and I want to kind of swirl just a little bit of ink off before I go here onto my cardstock. And I want you to use a very light touch and just add ink to the holly leaves. This is so easy to do. By the way, the more the ink is coming off, the harder I'm pressing. You know what? I think I want to add one more little bit of color, and that is just a touch of crushed curry. So I've got another small blending brush, just like I did before. I'm going to get some of that off of there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just swirl in between, anywhere in between my holly leaves. It's really pretty, isn't it? Nice and soft. So let me just bring in my other project, and you can see this one I stamped Season Greetings from that same Christmas Classics stamp set, and I added it to the box. This box is now in shaded spruce and real red. My layering pieces there are also in shaded spruce. So just another idea, but I want you to go beyond Christmas. This image could be a flower, and you could make it for birthday, or maybe balloons, or just some stars, just something fun. Or of course, like we did on our first box, you could just use designer series paper. And the sentiments, get creative, create these cards for any gift-giving occasion. Now, I promised you I was going to teach you how to create the box if you don't have the Simply Scored board. Your cutting measurements for your cardstock will be exactly the same. I'm just going to bring in a scrap here so I can teach you this. But remember, that was a 7 by 10 piece of Moody Mauve. So we're talking the lid right now, only the lid. The box, you are going to score it at 2 inches on all 4 sides. That part was easy. But for the lid, remember that was at a 1 1/4. So I'm going to put my lid cardstock at 1 1/4, and then I want you to bump it down. Just come over to the right of 1 1/4, and that is where you are going to score. That's going to give you that little nudge, just like we did with our shim. Remember, this was giving us just that hair less to help box and lid go together well. Now, I gotta tell you, I love my Simply Scored board. I have had it since the day Stampin' Up! Came out with it. It is a favorite of mine. And I love that I can create this shim, always be able to make boxes and lids super easy, because giving the gift of hand-stamped cards is always in season.
Thank you so much for being with me today, my friends. Can't wait to stamp with you next time. Bye-bye.